to SOUQ Pulse. We're here just like we've always been, and we hear and we talk, we discuss, we dialogue. We also read your communication via our social media channels, and we say thank you for always being there for us. Today we will hit the matter hot, and we will go straight from what we spoke about at the last episode. People were still asking questions, trying to say, okay, if we say AIDS, it's not the best for Africa, then what? And that brings us to what we're talking about today. On SOUQ Pulse, we look at issues across borders. We look at issues that have to do with policies, be it government, be it international organizations, be it donor agencies, be it the loans that are not being paid by African nations, be it the extra loans that are still hanging on the necks, be it whatever form you call it reshuffling, call it rescheduling, call it whatever. How are businesses thriving under these policies? How are businesses and the individuals running these businesses, how are they doing? Are they positive? Is it negative? How are the countries themselves doing? Are they growing in the light of the burden they bear? Are they really fulfilling the promises made from the onset? We look at these relationships, and on Pulse, we tell ourselves some basic truth, and we look for not just solutions, but telling ourselves, I think we should try this other way, or these people, or this set, or these businesses can get better. And so SOUQ Pulse come, and we talk. We don't just talk. We follow it with action. My name is John-Rogers Chuks, and I'm here with our own in-house analyst, and a man of not just many words, but very, very strong wisdom. Sir, good afternoon, Mr. Sam.
A pleasure, Chuks. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. For the last time, you say you didn't get to see Mr. Sam, but we were privileged to have Dr. Idahosa. But today we have Mr. Sam. So before he bails on us and runs to another country, he's here locked. And today we are looking at business clusters. Yes, you heard us right. Now, for business clusters, we will be using the words interchangeably, be it the industry clusters or business clusters, so don't get confused. And we are looking at what role has government played in their formation and in their growth. Now, we will be looking at business cluster from our definition, from our perspective, not what someone else defines it to be or looks at it to be. Now, we look at our history. If we go way back before colonization, we had people that made craft, we had people that made canoes. And a lot of these industries were situated very close proximity in a particular location. The guy cutting the tree, the man carving, the man making sure that these things can float, those coming to buy, those selling, those pushing. So that was also a cluster. So don't get confused when somebody tells you he's the one that defined the cluster. They've always been there. Now we are looking at how do we move the nation forward. There's no better way of moving the nation forward than what? Production. Be it in whatever industry. Production. So now what makes production faster, better, and cuts across when we start forming clusters? Be it clusters for a particular set of industry or industries that cut across the divide. And that's what we're looking at today. Business industry clusters. How has government played a role in their growth? Several have sprung up on their own. Has government in those particular countries tried bringing sanity or making sure that this particular set of places, location and industry, those clusters grow? Then we've also had several that has come via government policies. We'll also be looking at them. For the purpose they were set up, are they living up to it? Are people embracing it? Are industries embracing it? Are businesses embracing it? So, sir, I bring you into this conversation. We are looking at business clusters. Now, let's start with those that government have tried. Let's start with locations that government have tried bringing in on board. So let's start with our own climb here. In Nigeria, we get to see free trade zones. Okay. Several free trade zones. So can you give us like a background on some of the free trade zones in Nigeria?
Yeah, ordinarily I would have preferred to navigate from business clusters,
okay,
driven by small and medium enterprise.
Okay.
Nevertheless, we can attempt to begin the conversation from the government ones, which are really called industrial clusters, as it were. So you have economic processing zones that are dedicated to specific industries based on either sectorial or geography. The government want to take advantage of specific industry so that people are put into those clusters to take advantage of economic scale, take advantage of skills that are inherent in those particular clusters. So on the other hand, if you talk about real business clusters, we have one readily in mind in Nigeria that has been studied internationally. You have what you call the OTIGBA business clusters, otherwise known as computer village. Is a business case model in terms of business clusters where you have agglomeration of technical skill sets that are located within one area, and people have taken advantage of that technical skill set that are domiciled within those business cluster. And in terms of semi-manufacturing, that is one. There's another one in East Africa, the fish processing cluster in Uganda, another very successful business cluster model in Africa that has been very successful, where you have people that are situated to the edge of the River Nile, which is the source, where the fishermen bring the fish, you process, and the entire value chain.
Within that same?
Yeah, within that same sector.
Okay.
And these were small businesses that over a period of time, they grow to that certain level where interest in terms of the derivative you can get from the clusters become very beneficial. But to what extent the government has supported those clusters is a different conversation. Because
why is it a different conversation?
No,
because we are going to break them down.
Yes, the very successful business cluster within Africa, okay. I just mentioned two. There's another one very, very, very great that you have in Egypt as well. It's called the furniture business cluster.
Okay.
That take advantage of core manufacturing of everything that has to do with furniture, from the wood, from the popping processes to the final product, taking advantage of the geography. So that one is based on geography, a concept of geography when you talk about business cluster. Then you talk about sectorial, the OTIGBA and the fish processing one that I mentioned in Uganda are some of the biggest business cluster model beyond the purview of the industrial clusters when you talk about economic processing zone, free trade zones, and all that. Okay. That's where you have the government trying to provide an incentive window, okay, where people come into that area. Then you have what you call a tax exemption, okay, for a period of time so that you can consolidate your business. But then the ones that are grown by small and medium enterprise, coming from their own technical competencies, in terms of organization, in terms of geography, in terms of sector, that industry is built up by private investment. With even the one, the OTIGBA, which is a success story in Africa Business Cluster, is even called the Silicon Valley of Africa. So that gives you the kind of growth pattern that has taken place with comparison to the Silicon Valley in the United States of America. Okay,
let me break you down a bit. Now, we've had these clusters in different industries. Now, some people might not see it as clusters. At a particular point in time, government was involved in doing something. Let's take, for example, in Benue, we had agric boards. And those boards catered for a lot of the farming that was coming from a particular region. To be precise, Benue. Government provided a trade board where most of those products could come, you buy, you sell. You did not need to move your whatever you are selling, whatever you are producing from Benue to, let's say, Lagos. So they provided a market within that particular vicinity. Same thing happened with cocoa. We had that in Ibadan, we had that in Ondo. Same thing happened with cashew. We had that somewhere between Enugu. With time, this now started dying away. I'm using Nigeria as an example. Now, if government then saw this as something that could not just keep the people engaged or put food on their table, but also a means of earning, why did they die? Or is it that government took their hands off it, or it was mismanagement, or those boards were not just profitable anymore? I
think it was not the issue of mismanagement. It was a government control system that actually killed some of those marketing boards. They were feeding into various clusters.
And with the death of those marketing boards, those clusters dwindled?
They equally died because the military regime that centralized the government couldn't sustain some of those business clusters. For example, if you talk about the clusters in terms of cocoa production that was within the Western Nigerian government at that particular point in time, was very successful, and people took advantage. You had grading board, you have bonded terminals, you have grading agent, you have warehousing facilities that took care of those clusters. But when the military coup came with the unification decree of Aguiyi-Ironsi, the regional clusters, if we put them, you had the cotton in the north, you had the cocoa, you had the palm and the rubber in the east and in the Midwest. They were no longer sustainable based on the central government system that did not encourage and could not sustain those marketing boards. So they died naturally, not because they were not sustainable as business clusters, but the policy regime at that particular point in time could not sustain those clusters, and those clusters died naturally.
Okay, if we say the policy regime could not sustain those clusters, are we going, that means there was another thing that was producing money for the government?
Yeah, there was overdependence on the oil and gas.
Free money?
I don't call it free money.
At that particular point in time.
The focus on the monoproduct economy has been the bane of development in Nigeria. So when you talk about the concept of diversification, more often than not, with due respect to those in government, they pay lip service when you say you are diversifying the economy. Okay. So to what extent?
Sorry to cut you. If this happens to these very profitable clusters at that point in time, and we've grown over time to this particular point, don't you think it's the same kind of treatment that is being meted out to some other clusters that should have sprung up by now?
No, you must look at them from two different perspectives. It's very critical to put them into form and shape.
Okay.
You have the ones that the government feels they can provide some incentive for their industrial development policy.
Okay.
That's on the one hand. On the other hand, you have individually driven business clusters where small and medium enterprises galvanize their technical skills within a sector and begin to grow that business to a level that becomes multi-billion naira business without government involvement in those clusters. Okay. And I talked about the Otigba business cluster, popularly known as the Computer Village, otherwise known as the Silicon Valley of Africa. So if you look at it from that perspective, there are medium enterprises that have galvanized their skill sets, their technical know-how, their specialized skills in an industry, and they are moving in the direction and they're able to grow the business. Then when you talk about this export processing zone, free economic zone, where there's a tax incentive, maybe from a period of about 5 to 10 years, where investors are allowed to recoup their level of investment. Again, to what extent has these free zones, export processing zone, impacted on the industrial development of the country? Again, maybe as we progress in the conversation, we're able to speak to some specific issues in those areas. So business clusters from the business model perspective, whether they are sectorial, whether they are based on geography, is to take advantage of key competencies in that industry. People harmonize their skill sets to the advantage. So within a small cluster, people get service for certain things, and the businesses are thriving based on.
Okay. Now, let's look at it from this other angle. Now, several research has been done on several clusters, industrial clusters and business clusters. Okay. One thing was sure. No matter the amount of sectorialism or ethnicity within a cluster, what moves the cluster more is their ability to work faster. Introduction of machinery, introduction of better working knowledge, technology. Now, what also moved the country forward is production, which means if we take oil and gas out of this, it now depends on, okay, what else are you pushing out? What are you selling? Now, if these industrial clusters can bring up products that can be pushed and bring in this much needed dollars, I'm just thinking, is it not proper that the governments of Africa should put their heads down and encourage clusters wherever they see one, if they are not the ones that are trying to form it? Let me give an example. We have the tanning cluster in Kano, Kaduna, Jigawa, that particular axis. As we speak now, that is more like history. We have the shoe cluster somewhere in Aba. As we speak, all we see is lip service. We still have the garment factory, a garment cluster, somewhere here in Lagos. A lot of the clothes people make and see stamps. I won't mention the names they see there, but they are made here in Lagos, somewhere in Yaba. At what point in time or at what stage do you think the government can come and encourage these clusters? Or what can big government input into these clusters?
I think what the government can do to sustain small and medium enterprise business clusters is to find a way to create easy access to finance, which is one of the major challenge in most of the business clusters. Access to finance is a major challenge. So if the government can find a way to galvanize the financial service sector in a manner that they can lend to specific business clusters to grow those businesses, that would be a welcome development. Even though with the Ministry of Industry, you have an industrial policy that is in place in addition to the small and medium enterprise, what is it called, SMEDAN, in place. But then to what extent can the government get involved in the various business clusters, lend specifically to specific clusters so that they can grow the economy? That's on the one hand. Two, even though they have some technical skill competence, there are certain things that are lacking within those business clusters. So the government can come in to provide additional incentive to help those business clusters. Some clusters may have some skill sets that are relative to their industry. But then when you talk about maybe financing, you talk about packaging, if you talk about marketing, if you talk about packaging trade agreements and all that, some of those clusters are lacking in those competencies. So the government can come in and provide a kind of holistic competence that will sustain those sectorial business clusters. Then beyond the other windows, other corridors of free zones, export processing zones, which have been carved by the government to getting some specific industry into the economy to be more productive. Then those free zones can equally tap into the existing business clusters to enhance their own manufacturing and export so that we can grow the economy as a collective between small and medium business clusters, then the government industrial clusters.
Okay, let's look at it from this other angle again now. We are looking at industrial clusters. I gave the example of the shoemaking cluster in Abia. We are looking at the Otigba here in Lagos. Is it possible whereby government policies can make those clusters competitive? Now, I give an example. No matter the amount of shoe you make in Aba, China can close up their eyes and make something cheaper and ship to you, which is what is happening right now. No matter the amount of gadgets we fix in Otigba, any of the big brands can ship the same thing to us, cheaper. Can government look at policies that can make some of these clusters competitive and their product used, even if we are not exporting, at least within Africa?
Oh yes, simply from the industrial policy perspective, there's a need for the government to protect some of these business clusters. Protection means that you must find a way to put a regulatory framework that supports manufacturing from that point of view. So protectionism, which is an element of international trade, can be used domestically to sustain some of those businesses that we spoke about. So you manufacturing shoes in the Aba business hub, and those shoes are given foreign titles, which are not Nigerian-based titles. So remain very competitive, using foreign labels and brands to sell those things. But if there's a form of protection from the government, then competitiveness will be sustained in that industry. And to a very large extent, even if the products cannot compete globally at this particular point in time, then over time, through the concept of innovation, you can improve on those manufacturing to a point where they cannot compete. So, by and large, the point I'm trying to make is that the government must find a way to protect some of these business clusters so that they can stay and remain in business. So we need a policy framework from the government. I know there are a lot of industrial policy framework from 1966, some revisions even up to 2007. To what extent this protectionism can support local manufacturing that are based within these clusters. So that, to a very large extent, will help us to save some foreign exchange, and that reduce the pressure that we currently face within that industry. So it's important that the government must look inward. How did we do it under the regional government? That we had the pyramids, the cocoa, rubber, palm, and some other, even timber. And you talk about tin. When I was in the primary school, we used to say those things offhand. You talk about tin and colobite. You talk about Jos. You talk about hide and skin. You talk about Kano and cotton. But then, as we speak, we can't really see any of those things. So if you're talking about diversification from non-oil and gas sector, then we must find a way to sustain those businesses by putting clusters, deliberate clusters in place, so that we can take advantage of the various value chains that exist within those sectors, so that we can grow the non-oil and gas sector. But when I looked at the last year budget, you see the non-oil and gas sector contributed more in terms of revenue to the entire revenue that we had as a country. So I think the government, as a deliberate policy, must look inward to drive these processes. And if we can take some little example from Ghana, our immediate neighbor, that had this kind of initiative where the Chinese are taking certain things from Ghana, cocoa and some other things. The government has put a policy in place that, yes, don't take these products away as primary commodities. You must find a way to process them to form of semi-finished products so that the farmers and those who are into small manufacturing can take advantage of those policies. And I think that has been very successful in Ghana.
Okay. Now, looking at projects and clusters that have been successful, we will come back and we will still look deeper into this issue. Remember, apart from the clusters themselves, we are looking at what role has government played, what role can they play in formation and in making sure that these clusters grow. Clusters are everywhere. Some you might not even see right now, but gradually they are growing, owing to the industrious mind of people, of Africans. Now, how can the government play into this and not just put work in homes, but put production in the heart of Africans? We are going on a break. SOUQ Pulse will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Lateef Jakande. Born Lateef Kayode Jakande in the Ekpetedo area of Lagos Island, Lagos State on July 1929. He studied at the Lagos Public School at Enowa, Lagos Island, then at Bonham Memorial Methodist School, Port Harcourt, King's College, enrolled at Ilesha Grammar School, where he edited a literary paper called The Quarterly Mirror. Jakande began a career in journalism in 1949 with a daily service and joined the Nigerian Tribune in 1953. The owner, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, appointed Jakande editor-in-chief of the Tribune in 1956. Jakande established John West Publications in 1975 after leaving Tribune and began to publish the Lagos News. He served as the first president of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, NPAN. Jakande ran for election as executive governor of Lagos State in 1979 on the Unity Party of Nigeria platform. His administration was effective and open and implemented the cardinal policies of his party. He introduced housing and educational programs targeting the poor, building new neighborhood primary and secondary schools, and providing free primary and secondary education. He gave poor people's children education, and many of them are now very prominent in the society today. Jakande established the Lagos State University and constructed over 30,000 housing units. After the military takeover in 1983, Jakande was charged, prosecuted, and convicted of treason and later pardoned. He served as Minister of Works under the Sani Abacha military regime. He died in Lagos on February 11, 2021. Lateef Jakande was the first civilian governor of Lagos State. Lateef Kayode Jakande, SOUQ Enlightenment.
Yes, welcome back. We are looking at industrial clusters and we are asking ourselves what role can governments play in not just the formation but also helping to see the growth of these particular clusters. They could be regional, they could not be regional, and they are majorly related industries, concentrated. It could be one place. It might not even be one place. They could be connected via some other form of communications on transactions. We are looking at suppliers, service providers. We're looking at buyers, makers. We're looking at people that patronize. We're looking at research. We're looking at some form of education where they all come together and they make sure that that particular cluster, that industry, everybody is making, buying, selling, and things are moving forward. That is what will grow an economy. That is what will grow a place. Now, we are still looking at, let's come back to the part of research. Let's come back to the part of education within that set of cluster. Let's take, for example, those that are in the Otigba market you talked about. When you hear people call Hopkins University, one of the major things that comes to your mind is medicine, because they are affiliated to a whole lot of hospitals. When you hear about NASA, you now start talking about the universities rather in Texas, in Nevada, because a lot of the research happening in NASA is coming from those particular institutions. Now, this kind of gives us this bad feeling. What are the research coming from our own institutions down here in Africa? Where are we using them? These clusters that are supposed to be growing, what impact is education from our institutions, be it the technical schools, be it the technical colleges, be it the university, of what impact are they making in these places? Not just grants. Back, and apologies for that breaking transmission. We were still talking about educational input and direct collaborations with clusters and industries within Africa. So we give examples of John Hopkins and a lot of the medical schools and major hospital research and medical research. They get associated with. We're also looking at, we talked about NASA and a lot of the universities right from Nevada to Texas, and they are all associated with them. Now let's bring this home. When are we going to start seeing universities, technical colleges, directly having direct impact, be it from their research or direct work of these clusters, or even the individual industry themselves? Because that is where we get to see research work. We get to see innovations at work. Then we can say, okay, this is what came out of this school. This is ours. This is our technology. This is our research. This is our production. Others can now come and say, okay, we don't have this, we want to buy this. When can we start seeing this?
All right, in terms of research innovation, there's a very serious disconnect between the universities, colleges of education, and technical vocational schools. Disconnect in the sense that research do not find their way into industry. On the other hand, industry do not really depend so much on research finding from the university. So this disconnect must be resolved, and essentially this has to be done by the government. On the other hand, the university themselves, in my own personal view, and I feel so strong about it, I've canvassed that strongly through some of the things that we do in writing, that beyond strike by the university staff union, can't we rethink the relationship between the town and the GAN with a view to seeing how we can use research to innovate and see how industry can benefit from research finding? Two things very critical here. There are a few research that have found themselves into industry, but then there should be more collaboration, deliberate collaboration between the university. What stops a university, for example, that has an engineering department for generating its own electricity, and you sell the surplus to the immediate community, and you make revenue from those money. There's a university in the United States of America that produces sufficient energy, and some of its revenues, over 48 or 48 point something percent, is energy that is supplied commercially to outside community of the university. So we must rethink, we must reskill our students. What stops the university making it compulsory for a mechanical engineering student to have a one-year field experience with a manufacturing company? Not this grandiose H&D arrangement where you say you have 1 year for industrial attachment, you carry a logbook and give to a relation to sign it off that you have passed through an industrial attachment training. That is not good enough. So we need to rethink, we need to rework, we even need to reskill scholarship, those in the academia. Academics must find a way to see how they can benefit from industry, not just going to industry to ask for some aid to build some centers within the university. That's not the point I'm making. I'm saying that university must have collaboration, deliberate collaboration with industry, and government can underwrite some of this relationship.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
In a way that industry can relate more with the town and GAN. Not relationship in terms of begging to build an energy center, asking Ericsson to build something.
A research to go study abroad.
Yes, within the University of Lagos, it has some centers. That's not the point I'm making. This collaboration, we need to have professors in research and development in industry. Industry should endow shares in specific research. And let those endowed shares be seen in industry.
That, yes, this particular research
industry
came from this place.
Then even the clusters, when those universities of agriculture came into being some years ago,
that should be another question.
Yes, I was thinking that those agricultural universities and University of Technology,
wherever they are located,
wherever they were located, we're going to tie into the business hub, or what we call business clusters, and take advantage of research and development to grow certain business hubs.
Within those localities.
Yeah, clusters, within those localities.
But what we see is just certificates.
Yeah, even university, when they even have what they call venture businesses and all that, and you're manufacturing sachet water,
they end
and you see that's entrepreneurship.
Seminars
yeah.
and workbooks.
Even with the introduction of entrepreneurship into some of the curriculum of the tertiary institution, you teach entrepreneurship from a theoretical point of view, and people don't even have a hands-on experience in industry in terms of entrepreneurship. So you have even clusters that were developed by government, some industrial incubators. You have one in Agege.
Okay.
You have one in Maturi-Oshodi.
Okay.
I think you have. Okay. You know, I'm just saying that
for those particular ones
they were supposed to be tied to various universities.
For those ones that were government introduced, for some of these ones that you mentioned, what stops people? Are they easily accessible?
No, they are accessible. People are there.
Government staffs are there.
No. Yes, you may have Federal Ministry of Industry, Federal Ministry of Science and Technology are tied to some of them. But the point I'm making, that you have local fabricators.
Okay.
Local engineers.
Okay. This brings
who
us...
are trying to do manufacturing based on their own concepts. So the point I'm trying to make, just as an example, why don't we tie some research and development into those incubator sectors and tie to some of the universities where industries can take advantage.
Directly benefit.
Yeah, can benefit.
Now, if let's look at some other institutes that are directly government funded or government established. We have several research institutes cut across Africa. Let's use Nigeria for example. We have the Badegi Rice Cereal Research Institute in Badegi, which is one of the biggest in Africa, on paper. We have the Leather
No, not
Institute.
on paper, Chuks. Not on paper. Let's correct that impression.
Okay.
There are research findings.
I'm talking about.
No.
I'm talking about.
No, I just need to make
I'm
that
not talking about what the product they've come out with. I'm looking at their impact on the locality.
Is there, no, on the locality. No, let's just get a point.
Can I call some of them?
Yeah, what we're saying is that we need to scale up some of those research findings.
No, well, I'm not going to research findings yet.
No, what I'm saying, some of those institutes.
Okay.
Let's take NIFO for example.
Okay.
I know for sure that they've improved on the seedlings, palm produce seedlings.
Okay.
That when you have a yield per acre times 10 of what the tradition. No, what I'm trying to say.
I'm coming to this answer now. I'm coming now. Let's start. The Cereal Institute in Bida, to be precise, on your way, is in Bida. The NIFO you just mentioned, the tanning in Zaria. There are several of them. But
tropical agriculture in Ibadan.
In Ibadan,
you will have the
ITA.
horticultural institution, which is a government establishment
now,
that has improved.
We are looking at. Let's look at this four. Let's look at this four. Now, when we look at research that has come out of these places, published research, things that are positive, they are there. They are there. Now, what is stopping the actualization of bringing this particular research and putting it into either the farms or putting it into local industries or dropping it on clusters? Must they be paid for? What is the divide? Is it that the communication is not there for people to, okay, let me assess this? Because just like what you said now, you're looking at the yield for the palm nuts, the palm fruit. Our palm oil production has not increased in the last years.
No, it has increased. The point I'm trying to make here is that we must make a deliberate policy to scale up those research and development and innovation from these centers. You have
taking it from the centers.
Yeah, no, into industry. They are,
good.
But
to what extent?
Yeah, the impact is what should scale up. Whether you talk about
why
cereal,
is the impact not scaling up?
You talk about horticulture, you talk about palm produce, you talk about rubber. These institutes had produced some basic research that are finding a way into industry.
I agree.
But then I'm conversing here that the narrative should be to what extent can we scale up this finding, more collaboration with industry.
Okay.
Some of these industries that are coming to take our primary product away, the government should find a way to provide a disincentive for some of them that they can.
Can I also shock you? A lot of the research that's coming from this institute is profiting those outside more than it's profiting us.
I agree.
So what exactly is holding us down?
So we're saying that the government must provide some protection to local industry, then find a way to provide some disincentive for those who come to take our primary commodity away, so that industry...
Not just primary commodity, our research also.
No, research is universal. Whoever can pay for research sometime can have those research to their own advantage.
If we cannot hold down that research, that is what the West is holding against China, I hope you know. If either you take it, you buy it, or you steal it. Now, this is the small that we have. Why are we letting it go?
I just feel that there should be more collaboration. There are research findings that are industry. University should find a way to streamline their curriculum in line with emerging industry practice, so that they can take advantage of their research and development.
We are almost out of time, but let's look at this. Now, we have several other clusters scattered around Africa. One of the major ones in South Africa is the wine cluster, which is just everywhere. Now, is it possible for Africa to say, okay, now let's see how we can connect clusters with countries? Instead of Nigeria, West Africa importing all the amount of wine we're importing from Spain, Italy, and all those places, let's import the one from South Africa.
Absolutely. I agree with that. That's one of the things we must do so that we can connect various clusters, and that's what we call factor endowment or comparative advantage. So where specific countries are strong with certain items, they should take advantage of those factor endowment and find a way that they can link cluster to cluster within Africa. And if you take advantage of the wine industry, you take advantage of the yam industry in Nigeria, if you take advantage of the furniture industry in Egypt, if you take advantage of the fish processing, natural fish processing in terms of drying, in terms of even refrigeration, in Uganda, for example, you take advantage of the coffee and tea of East Africa, and we try to connect these hubs. And that's why I spoke in another program when I talk about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that has the potential of over 1.something billion people in Africa, 54 countries that make up the continent. If we can do a kind of intra-African trade, taking advantage of these industrial clusters, business clusters, then I think Africa will be better for it, in my view.
Thank you very much. We are very grateful to always have you on this particular show. It's still SOUQ Pulse. And remember, we are looking at how can we become more productive in Africa. And we're looking at business and industrial clusters. 1 hour is not just enough to do justice to this, but hey, look around you. For those of you and us in Nigeria, there is a furniture cluster in Benin, and it's growing. There is a shoe cluster in Aba, it's growing. There is still a leather cluster somewhere in Kano. There is something happening around you. Learn, be part of it, and patronize. It's not every time we import something. And we're looking forward to government being a strong part in helping the growth of these clusters. If we can stop their competitors from sending in the goods here, then good and fine. These places have to grow, and Africa needs to move forward. My name is John-Rogers Chuks, and it's always a pleasure being here for you. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.